Shortly after his birth in Laie, Hawaii, and that's why he has the middle name Keawe, Brother Marlowe moved to the mainland, where he spent most of his growing up years in California and Idaho. After a mission in Honduras, he attended Ricks College, now BYU Idaho, of course, and then Utah State University. Upon graduation, he began working full-time for the church education system as a release-time seminary teacher in Salt Lake City. He completed a PhD at BYU in Provo while teaching half-time in their religion department, and then he became a CES coordinator in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then he arrived at BYU Hawaii in 2011, where he's been teaching ever since, and he's delighted to be part of this university and its unique mission. Again, we're grateful for Brother Marlowe, who's spent so much time studying the history of this wonderful temple, and we now invite you to listen to his devotional address.
In the third dedicatory session of the Laie Hawaii Temple in November 1919, Rutger Clausen, president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, borrowed a traditional greeting long used among Hawaiian congregations. Drawing a handkerchief from his pocket, he held it aloft by its four gathered corners. Then, as he explained that he had brought the Aloha from the Relief Society General Board in Salt Lake City to the Sisters of Laie, he opened up the handkerchief, and all the saints immediately responded with a hearty aloha, after which he then symbolically folded up the handkerchief containing their response and returned it to his pocket to return home with him. Though now simplified, we continue this tradition today. Brothers and sisters, aloha. Aloha. All Latter-day Saint temples throughout the world serve the same valuable purpose, and the ordinances and the covenants are the same in each. Yet each temple has its own unique story to tell. Laying the foundation of faith for the Laie Hawaii Temple began early in church history. Just 3 years after the first company of pioneers reached the Salt Lake Valley, a group of 10 missionaries was sent to the Hawaiian Islands to share the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. They disembarked in Honolulu in December 1850 during the Kamehameha Dynasty. The day after their arrival, these elders climbed a nearby mountain, built an altar, and dedicated the islands of Hawaii for the preaching of the gospel. Despite these missionaries' initial optimism, when given the chance, half returned home that first year. George Buchanan, the youngest of the 10 missionaries, said of his decision to remain, "I felt resolved to stay there, master the language, and warn the people of those islands, for I felt that I could not do otherwise." This was a turning point. Not long thereafter, Cannon met and converted Hawaiian judge Jonathan Hawaii Napela, who helped him and the other elders learn the native language. And within 3 years, nearly 3,000 native Hawaiians were baptized. Amid successes and setbacks, more Utah missionaries were sent to Hawaii. Among those arriving in 1854 was 15-year-old Joseph F. Smith, son of Hiram and nephew of the prophet Joseph Smith. This was the first of 3 missions he would serve in Hawaii over his lifetime. George Buchanan and Joseph F. Smith never forgot Hawaii, and between them, they would go on to serve in the first presidency as a counselor or as prophet for over 50 years. Like their counterparts serving elsewhere in the mid-1800s, missionaries in Hawaii taught that new members should gather to Zion in Utah. However, in an effort to preserve the dwindling population, the Kingdom of Hawaii forbade such immigration. In response, President Brigham Young recommended that mission leaders find a location where the Hawaiian saints could gather, and the Palawai Basin on the small island of Lanai was secured for this purpose in 1854. However, this location was later discontinued, and in 1865, the church purchased the 6,000-acre land division of Laie to be the new gathering place for the church in Hawaii. Yet despite their own place of gathering, the island saints, Hawaiian saints continued to long for temple blessings. And as restrictions on immigration relaxed, Hawaiian saints began voyaging to Utah. Eventually, a group of Hawaiian saints established a colony west of Salt Lake City that they named Iosepa, the Hawaiian word for Joseph. For more than 25 years, this colony was home to a number of Hawaiian and other Polynesian saints who came to Utah seeking temple blessings. However, numerous Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders did not settle in at Iosepa, but rather journeyed to the temple in Utah, received the ordinances, and returned to the islands, all at significant sacrifice. In the year 1900, George Q. Cannon, then first counselor in the First Presidency, returned to Hawaii in celebration of the mission's 50th anniversary. Deeply impressed by their enduring faithfulness, President Cannon began to speak openly to the Hawaiian saints about the possibility of receiving temple blessings. Not long after President Cannon's visit, Joseph F. Smith, who cumulatively had served nearly 7 years among the Hawaiian saints, was set apart as the 6th president of the church. During his tenure as prophet, church membership in Hawaii approached 10,000. And the righteous longevity of the Hawaiian saints, many now third-generation members, had few peers among groups of the church members living outside the Intermountain West. Furthermore, few groups of members far from the main body of the church have proved to be so faithful and desirous of temple blessings longer and at such a level of sacrifice than the saints in Hawaii and the greater Pacific. Thus it was in 1915 when President Joseph F. Smith received an invitation from Apostle and U.S. Senator Reed Smoot to join him on a visit to Hawaii. President Smith accepted, also inviting his good friend, Presiding Bishop Charles W. Nibley, to join them. President Smith was profoundly moved by his experience among the Hawaiian saints during this nearly 2-week visit. And noting the economic strength of the mission, he determined that the time to build a temple in Hawaii had come, and straightway he decided to dedicate a temple site prior to his departure. During the evening of June 1st, 1915, President Smith asked that Elder Smoot and Bishop Nibley join him for a walk. After making their way from the mission home to the Laie Chapel, President Smith suggested that a temple be built where the chapel then stood. He added that if this met their approval, then he felt impressed to dedicate the land for that purpose. All agreeable, President Smith did so. Of the prayer, Elder Smoot recalled, "I never saw a more beautiful night in all my life. The surroundings were perfect. I have heard President Smith pray hundreds of times, but never in all my life did I hear such a prayer. The very ground seemed to be sacred, and he seemed as if he were talking face to face with the Father." 4 months later, in the opening session of the October 1915 General Conference, President Joseph F. Smith publicly announced that a temple would be built in Hawaii. Capturing the voice of many Hawaiians, Lyons Baldwin Nainoa, a longtime resident of Laie, declared, "We have prayed a long time that the Lord would help us go to Zion, to Utah, and now we have a temple brought to our land. Let us work day and night." Closely associated with the saints at Iosepa, Utah, President Smith paid them a personal visit shortly after the announcement and recommended that they return to Hawaii and help build the temple. Following the prophet's request, they returned to Laie, many settling on a street that would be named Iosepa in remembrance of the community they had left behind. Like the temples that preceded it, the local saints were expected, as much as possible, to finance their temple and supply the labor to build it, and almost immediately the Hawaiian saints began raising money. Families who had been saving money to attend the temple in Utah instead gave that money to the temple fund. Hawaiian Mission President Samuel Woolley challenged each member to raise $5 for the temple, a very large sum for most members at that time. Members raised money through weaving and selling lahala mats, sponsoring bazaars, dances, musical concerts, and so on. Remarkably, mission-wide, the Hawaiian saints exceeded their goal, raising $6 per member. Poignantly, among the first Hawaiian saints to meet their temple fund quota were the members at Kalaupapa, the leper colony on Molokai, who due to their condition would never be able to personally attend the temple they so eagerly and generously supported. Though member donations were substantial, the larger cost of the temple was remarkably met by profits from the Laie plantation, which enjoyed historically strong and consistent sugarcane prices during the temple's construction. Thus, all funding for the Hawaii temple was essentially contained to the Hawaiian Islands. Church leaders decided to use an architectural plan similar to that of the recently announced temple in Alberta, Canada. With a singular focus on temple ordinances, this design was strikingly different than all preceding Latter-day temples. Considering ancient and modern structures, such as the ancient temple in Jerusalem, pre-Columbian ruins in America, and modern American architect Frank Lloyd Wright's Unity Temple, the architectural firm of Pope and Burton chose to forego spires in their design. And an Angel Moroni statue was not considered in their design as it had not yet become a symbol synonymous with temples. All previous temples had been built from quarried stone, but the volcanic geology of Hawaii did not have such stone, and shipping it to the islands was too costly. However, architect Hiram Pope learned that lava rock, readily obtained near the temple site, could be crushed into aggregate, which would make very good concrete. And he determined that the temple could be built from reinforced concrete, an innovative technique at the time. Remarkably, in 1916, there was a building company in Honolulu that specialized in this very type of concrete construction, and they offered to do the job at half their normal cost. With the focus squarely on the 4 major ordinance rooms and the celestial room, architect Harold Burton arrived at a design that was both logical and simple. The 4 ordinance rooms are arranged around the center, like the spokes of a wheel, each one a few steps higher than the one before, and the celestial room in the center at the very top of the building. This arrangement was both practical and symbolic. As people pass through all 4 ordinance rooms, they do so in an ascending spiral to the celestial room, which occupies the highest space in the temple. Such architectural arrangement elegantly portrays the idea of progression found in the temple endowment ceremony itself. The 4 ordinance rooms, each pointing in a cardinal direction, create the outside design, a Greek cross. In Christianity, a cross generally represents Christ's sacrifice. However, a Greek cross with 4 arms of the same length can represent the 4 directions of the earth. Isaiah said, "The Lord shall set up an ensign for the nations and gather together the dispersed from the 4 corners of the earth." This symbol of gathering in this temple structure seems particularly symbolic when combined with the prophet Joseph Smith's statement that the main object of gathering was to build unto the Lord a temple whereby he could reveal unto his people the ordinances and teach them the ways of salvation. Furthermore, similar to ancient Israelite temples, the Laie Hawaii temple was deliberately built with its main doors facing east. Ezekiel wrote that the glory of the Lord came into the temple by way of the gate whose prospect is toward the east. This eastward orientation also symbolizes watching for the second coming of the Savior, an event likened to the dawning of a new day. When more than 50 years later, architect Harold Burton was asked what he would change if he were to design the Hawaii Temple today, he responded, "I was 29 years old when I designed that. With all the experience I have had, I couldn't add one thing to that building, not one thing. I was inspired, pure inspiration." The temple plans included a few sculptured panels to adorn the outside of the temple, and artist J. Leo Fairbanks and his 19-year-old brother, Avard, who was recognized as a sculpting prodigy, were tasked with the sculpting of these panels. They formulated sketches for 4 extensive panels or friezes that would encircle virtually the entire temple cornice. Each frieze represents one of the 4 major eras or dispensations, namely the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, and the Latter Days. Each panel portrays numerous characters from its corresponding scriptural era in a way that is tended to instruct, decorate, and inspire. Also tasked with sculpting the oxen for the temple's baptismal font, Avard carefully studied the animal and determined to craft one section of 3 oxen in different positions. This section was then reproduced 3 more times, and when all sections were fitted together, the 12 oxen appeared different when viewed from different angles. Of these oxen, art curator Paul Anderson concluded, "For one so young, Avard's sculpture work is quite astonishing in its expressive quality. The oxen for the baptismal font appear dignified, strong, and lifelike in their movements. perhaps the best ever executed for a temple. A beautiful setting around the temple was designated to enhance the monumental character. A 4-foot wall of lava rock enclosed the temple grounds, and 3 terraced pools with cement walkways on either side lead to the temple. The most elevated of these pools connects to a semicircular concrete wall, now covered in vines. This wall is intended to emphasize the height of the temple and to provide a secluded setting around its doors, in keeping with the temple's sacred purpose. At the head of the 3 pools is a panel in bold relief depicting a Hawaiian mother and her children. Avard explained that the Hawaiian mother pouring water out of a great shell to her children represents the fountain of life that a mother offers her children. The other sculpture Avard produced was Laie blessing Joseph. Shortly after the church arrived in Hawaii, missionaries and church leaders came to regard Pacific Islanders as descendants of the House of Israel. Leo Fairbanks explained that the statue symbolizes God's promise to Lehi's son, Joseph, realized through the early latter-day gathering of Israel in Hawaii and across Polynesia. 2 small buildings reflecting the unique architecture of the temple were built just below the terraced pools on either side of the entrance gates. They were fitted to receive visitors, and at that time were likely only the second visitor center in the church, and the first built simultaneously with the construction of a temple. Inclusion of a visitor center in the original design of the temple grounds was perceptive. Over the past century, likely more people have been introduced to the restored gospel of Jesus Christ on the Laie, Hawaii temple grounds than any other church site except Temple Square in Salt Lake City. That the building of the Hawaii temple could be achieved with such quality, using mostly unskilled labor in markedly remote conditions, without the use of heavy equipment, be financed entirely in Hawaii, and be completed within 2.5 years despite various delays, really was miraculous. However, the ultimate miracle is what the cumulative effort, with divine assistance, produced: a magnificent edifice eminently suited to its purpose as a house of the Lord. Construction of the temple was essentially completed in June 1918, yet the ailing health of President Joseph F. Smith, his passing in November 1918, and the global Spanish flu pandemic would delay the temple's dedication for nearly 1.5 years. Finally, President Heber J. Grant and his party arrived in Hawaii in November 1919 to dedicate the temple. Companies of saints began arriving in Honolulu on steamers from other islands, and on Wednesday, November 26th, exactly 100 years ago today, hundreds of saints began arriving in Laie by train. President Clausen observed, they presented an animated scene at the train depot as they stepped off the cars in their light-colored summer clothes and with smiling countenances. Friends from the colony of Laie were there to greet them with words of welcome and brotherly love. Over 4 days, 5 dedicatory sessions were held to accommodate the nearly 1,500 saints that had gathered to Laie. In his dedicatory prayer, first given on Thanksgiving Day 1919, President Grant said, "We beseech thee that thy spirit may ever dwell in this holy house and rest mightily upon all who shall labor therein. May all who come upon the grounds which surround this temple feel the sweet and peaceful influence of this blessed and hallowed spot." The prayer concluded, "We most earnestly pray that this sacred building may be a place in which thou shalt delight to pour out thy Holy Spirit in great abundance, and in which thy Son may see fit to manifest himself and to instruct thy servants." The Sunday morning session was conducted for primary-age children. Mary Ann Wong Song was 9 years old at the time and later recalled, the children were taken into the temple and walked up and up until he came to a room that President Heber J. Grant was in. He welcomed us and talked to us. He asked us to sing one of his favorite songs, which was "Who's on the Lord's Side Who?" He sang with us too. It was the first time I had ever seen a prophet of the Lord. Reflecting on the 4-day dedicatory event, President Heber J. Grant said, "I am at a loss to give thanks to the Lord for the inspiration of his Spirit which came to me in praying and speaking at the dedication of the Hawaiian Temple. and he proclaimed the events a spiritual feast never to be forgotten. The Hawaiian word ohana means family, not just the small nuclear family, but what Dorothy Leilani Belling refers to as the fully extended generational family of aunts, uncles, cousins. Ohana is the embracing, animating center of life, one's family, close quote. Just as within the church, our obligation to redeem the dead begins with our own immediate ancestry, our ohana. It might be assumed that after death, our first efforts to share the gospel in the spirit world would follow that priority as well. The Hawaiian race, which included numerous church members, was decimated by disease in the 1800s. This was devastating. Yet amid such loss, Hawaiian church members and the missionaries who served among them were often comforted by the understanding that those deceased members would now be furthering the gospel cause in the spirit world, particularly among their departed ohana. For more than 60 years, these departed Hawaiian members had been preaching to their families across the Veil. Now their faithful descendants had built a temple that could consummate that labor. What's more, many ancient Hawaiian names and ancestry had been preserved in chants and meles or songs and handed down through generations. These records would be among the first work for the dead done in the Hawaii temple. Of these conditions, Belling concluded, "I believe there was no place in all the world in 1919 that was any more prepared to support the work of a temple with centuries of ancestral records, over 60 years of preparation by departed missionaries to the dead, and a tried and faithful membership than Hawaii." The reward for this extraordinary effort was the Hawaii Temple. From its inception, the Hawaii Temple was destined to reach many kindreds, tongues, peoples, and nations. From a historical standpoint, it has been among the most ethnically prodigious temples of the latter days, and it began earning this moniker within months of its dedication. Beginning in 1920, groups of Maori saints began making the more than 9,000-mile round-trip journey to the Hawaii Temple. Samoan saints also began arriving in the 1920s to attend the temple, and a number of these families settled in Laie, becoming part of the fabric of this temple community. In the 1960s and 70s, Japanese and Korean saints arranged excursions to Laie Hawaii Temple as well. And saints across the Pacific and Asia have long sent their family names to Hawaii and had to have their temple work completed. This international reach is a hallmark of the Hawaii Temple's 100-year history and remains a striking example of the Church's early effort to carry the fullness of the gospel, realized only in temples, to all nations. The temple's international reach would be further extended by the apostolic visit of David O. McKay to Laie in 1921. During a flag-raising ceremony at the church-run school and in a meeting at the chapel next door, Elder McKay witnessed Hawaiians, Americans, Chinese, Japanese, and Portuguese, and Filipinos. And he recalled what an example in this little place of the purposes of our Father in heaven to unite all peoples by the gospel of Jesus Christ. From that experience, he visualized making Laie, with its temple, a center of education. In short, David O. McKay saw, as he likely could nowhere else at that time, the future of the church, a church that would one day be filled with all races and ethnicities. Eventually, President McKay's vision was realized with the establishment of this university in 1955. And what President McKay envisioned in 1921, I see every day in my classes. But this would not be the only synergistic connection the Laie Hawaii Temple would make with another institution. When looking for college student employment opportunities, the Polynesian Cultural Center was born. Originally to be built next to the temple, it was decided to expand the Temple Visitor Center to accommodate the additional visitors that the adjacent PCC would bring. Although the PCC was later moved away from the temple to its current location, the expanded Visitor Center was seen to completion. In 1963, the Polynesian Cultural Center opened its doors. Remarkably, the PCC has welcomed tens of millions of visitors to Laie over the years, and millions of those visitors have found their way to the temple grounds. Alton Wade, a former president of BYU Hawaii, explained, With the temple setting the tone, the temple, the school, and the cultural center work together in a dynamic way. Students lend the cultural center their exuberance, smiles, and radiant spirits, and the student wages from their jobs at the cultural center make it possible for many to attend school. As they walk across campus, students are blessed to see the house of the Lord rising above the palm trees, and those who enter that holy place can attune themselves spiritually and refocus on eternal objectives. And the visitor center near the temple attracts visitors as they leave the Polynesian Cultural Center. Only the Lord could orchestrate a marvelous threefold effort such as this. In conclusion, the Laie Hawaii Temple, dedicated a century ago, was at the forefront of a church-wide shift away from gathering to the Intermountain West. This temple was among the first brought to the people, and for decades it stood as the closest temple geographically to half the planet. It was among the first Latter-day Saint temples to accommodate large numbers of patrons from different cultures, speaking different languages. The temple played a role in spawning a university and a worldwide tourist attraction. And over the years, millions of visitors have been introduced to the church on the Laie Hawaii Temple grounds. Yet the ultimate purpose and power of the Laie Hawaii Temple is not found in its history, its outward beauty, or on its grounds, but rather can only be discovered by those who worthily spend time within its walls. Of our personal experience within the temple, 3-time Laie Hawaii Temple President Edward Clissold concluded, "There is no magic at the door of the temple that turns a sinner into a saint. The place for us to prepare to meet the Lord in this holy house is in the quiet walks of our everyday life, in our homes, in our businesses, in our private lives. Then we shall come to the temple to partake of the rewards which God has for the faithful. Here we shall receive the glorious endowments of the priesthood. Here we shall be sanctified. Here we shall do the work of our kindred dead. Here we shall be saviors on Mount Zion. And here we shall receive the strength and the fortitude that will carry us through life." The first paragraph of the temple's next 100 years will be written by us. What will we do with the blessings of a temple in our midst? May the opening paragraph include our renewed commitment to frequent and sustained service within its walls, is my prayer. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.